first go tonight, that'd be something.
Right, it's now being recorded. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, over to you then, Peter. Very much this is a trial run on really how successful like tuition evenings are with Zoom. We've got one or two in the program coming up, and well, barring sort of the technology letting us down and computers not working, I personally think it should work quite well, because we're all sat in front of a computer, and if we can see what Peter's doing or explaining what he's doing, and we can see it closely, then I think that's possibly more productive than even seeing it at the club sometimes. With the ability to record it, we can then go back over bits that we forget or misunderstood, and we can even sort of chop it up into little bits and individual tuition that we can all look at later. So over to you, Peter. We'll give it a go. Do you want a reminder in like an hour's time that we have a break, or is there a natural break to what you're doing?
A good start.
Yeah, we still got him.
He's
still messing about with these plugs.
Yeah. We can't hear you. Ooh, there we go. He's sharing his screen.
Oh.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Just,
You're pretty quiet.
Quiet.
Right.
yeah.
By the way, there's an apology from Ian just come through, saying that he's running a bit late, but he'll join us and log on ASAP.
Okay.
Okay, well, can you hear that any better?
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah.
Not too bad.
Okay, so you've got on screen what I'm supposed to do tonight. As you know, I do like my computers, and in the last couple of weeks I've had 2 new builds for old customers, an upgrade for a club member, and 3 reinstalls due to software gods, Microsoft they expect, which does mean I'm slightly ill prepared for tonight's session, but expect we'll muddle through, yeah? So, the first thing I want to show you, I'll try. That's a good start. I took a picture of my desktop so you could see how or what I've got, what I work on. Obviously, I've got a 3K screen, a high-res 3K screen there in the middle. It's quite old now, but it's still serviceable. And I have a small one next to it. It's not an expensive one, but I use that to keep all the panels, the Photoshop panels, history and all that stuff, so that it's not cluttering up the main screen. I can use the whole of the screen then for editing.
Sounds
Yeah, am I still all right for sound?
Yep.
How do you do that then?
How do you mean?
How do you split that off to get a second screen running?
Well, you need a video card that's got, or a computer that's got a second video output.
Okay.
I mean, most of NVIDIA cards you'll have 2 outputs, and I mean on the ones where people are just using the Microsoft ones now, mostly they also have two video outputs, and then you can set the 2 screens up whichever way you want, and once you basically set it up to extend your desktop, and then it's simply a matter of dragging the let's see, you can just drag a panel onto the screen if you want it, or drag it off, do whatever you want.
Sorry, while we're on the subject, I guess it's worth mentioning that if you don't have 2 HDMI outputs on your PC, you can use a tablet and something called Duet Display.
Okay, I've never used that, Tom. It's a good idea. But I mean, you see, this little screen over here, it's not expensive. I mean, it's not a high. That's another reason I use it. It's a 1600 by 900 resolution, and what that means is the panels, the writing on the panels, is a lot larger than it would be on the main display, which is a help for your eyes, because I mean the on the main screen the panels are quite small, aren't they? The writing on
Yeah.
the panels is small. Well, if you drag it onto a lower res screen, automatically the writing is bigger. So that's another reason why I use it. But the main reason, as I say, is because it gives me the whole of the main screen for editing. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can see in the forefront there, I've got a tablet. That's a Wacom tablet. It doesn't show up very well, but I mean, I couldn't really work Photoshop without a tablet these days, I don't think. It's very easy to draw with a brush if you've got a tablet, because it's just like holding a pen, isn't it? Or a pencil. So it's so much easier to use that I wouldn't be without it. Also, it's got an advantage. There's 8 express keys on the tablet, so you can assign various shortcuts to the key without having to resort to complicated key presses or searching through a menu for them. I also configure the keyboard, which is just behind it. That's a Logitech keyboard, and they have I think most of manufacturers do, there's a little program you get with the Logitech set point, which allows you to configure some of the keys and assign those differently. So I've got a few of the keys on there, mainly the F1 to F9 keys, so that I've got keyboard shortcuts on there. So things are just one key press away. I've also got, I've switched some of the keys around on the keyboard, but we can get to that later on. Any questions on that?
Is it worth having?
Hello?
Go on,
Sorry,
Keith.
go on, Martin. Sorry.
Is it worth having something like a keyboard overlay to give you all the various functions for Photoshop?
I don't think so, Martin. I mean, as photographer, I mean, there's a hell of a lot of keyboard functions. Let me see. Let me drag that out of the way.
I've started to use that way more recently.
If I can
Spent more
find-
time on the computer, I guess, over this lockdown period.
I mean, I've got a spreadsheet there with Photoshop, all the functions on it. I just downloaded the list from Photoshop, Adobe, I expect. But there are, believe it or not, 664 keystrokes.
Wow.
You can do anything from a keyboard in Photoshop. But as photographers, we just don't use that many, Martin. I mean, you only need to probably remember a dozen or so.
Okay.
You're good to go. Hello, Mum.
Sorry, she's got it now.
Okay, I
Sorry
mean, the
about
other
that.
thing to notice on the desktop while we're there, over on the left-hand side there, that's my external backup drives. I think a couple of you have already got those. It's just a docking bay.
Yeah.
You can just stick any 2 hard drives in. It takes the big ones and the little 2.5-inch ones, or it takes SSD drives, whatever you want, you know. You can just whip one out and shove another one in. And those are the backup disks. So I'm using hard drives for backup, obviously, because solid state drives are a bit too expensive yet. Okay. Don't think there's anything much more to say about that for the minute, apart from the fact that I don't know how obvious it is. I have the room fairly dark. I mean, I like to, you really want the room quite dark for photo editing. It's really dark now. So, color settings, Photoshop. You get that by, it's up in edit and color settings down there. Can you see that all right?
Yeah.
I made a copy of it and shoved it on screen because it's, rather than try and messing around all the time with magnifying it and trying to get it to, because you can't see them, you can't read the settings if they're that small on the desktop. Well, at least I mean, you'd have difficulty. Can you read the color settings, the lettering in that?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, we can see fine.
Yeah. Okay, well, anyway, the things that you need to look at on the color setting, I mean, this is quite straightforward, really. I mean, I don't know what you're all using for settings, but you really want to be using Adobe RGB. I mean, both Camera Raw and Lightroom, if you're using those, use Adobe RGB as the default color space. So it makes sense to have your Photoshop using the same color space. You can always convert your images to the lesser color space of sRG for web or digital imaging competitions, but you're already doing that anyway, I'm sure.
What about the camera bodies, Peter? I mean, you told me to put mine in RGB some years ago now.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter if you're using RAW, because the RAW file doesn't take any account of the color space, except when you get into your RAW editor. It just picks it up from there anyway, but I would put it on Adobe Camera Raw just to be on the safe side, just to make sure. I mean, if you're only shooting JPEGs, then obviously you want it on sRGB, but I can't imagine anybody here is still processing.
Oh yes, I do,
JPEG.
Keith.
Sorry?
Keith does.
Say that again, Brian?
Keith still uses JPEG.
Does it?
Keith Barry.
Do you, Keith?
He's gone. Oh, he's not. He's off his desktop.
Perhaps he had a
No,
phone.
I don't. No, I don't use JPEG. I use RAW.
Well, that's only recent.
I've done for bloody yonks.
Well, last time we had this discussion, you were still on JPEGs.
Rubbish.
But time goes quickly at my age, so.
Now, ladies. Anyway, the only important setting on it is you select Adobe RGB and make sure you set your grey gamma to 2.2. Now, you can use a save button over here to save those settings if you want to. I mean, I don't normally bother, but I did show it for that. But if you're using sRGB, which you probably aren't, you must change that to S-Gray, right? And if in the off chance that you're using ProPhoto as your color profile, then you need to change that to Grey Gamma 1.8 rather than 2.2. It's nothing to do with the monitor gamut, by the way. It's a completely different kettle of fish. Now, it only really matters if you use luminosity masks. I know one or two of you are starting to use luminosity masks, but if you don't set your grey gamma right here, then your luminosity mask won't split in at 50-50. You know, the grey point will move, so you'll get, it'll be weighted to one side of the midpoint. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, well that's about the only thing you need to bother about on there, but it is important. I mean, the other things, it's a matter of taste. You do what you want to do with the other settings. So, okay, if we move on to...
I've just decided I'm going to take a photo of the screen for everything I need to check.
Well, you can
to see what I've got. Well, I don't know. I've never checked that. If I'm honest. I have got troubles with my printer at the moment. It's printing so dark, I can't believe it.
Okay, so the next slot we have to worry about is actually setting up Photoshop in the preferences. You see where that is?
Yeah.
Edit preferences, and then you can choose whatever you want, okay? Now, again, I put a bigger size here, so look. The only thing on the general screen, well, perhaps two things on the general screen. I have show the home screen turned off because I don't like it. You may have it switched on, maybe you like it, I don't know. But the important thing here probably is export clipboard. All you're doing, if you export the clipboard, I mean, the Adobe clipboard can get very large. You know, it can take up a lot of resources. So unless you're actually going to use that clipboard in another application, you really don't want it soaking up resources. I mean, you're okay if you've got a fast PC with tons and tons of RAM on it, but it's always a good idea to save resources if you don't have to use them. So I would certainly turn that off unless, as I say, you are actually exporting to another program. You might be doing that, say, if you were a web designer and you're going to export something into what is it? The Adobe, well, you know, one of the other Adobe programs, InDesign it is called, isn't it? If you're going to export to InDesign, then you'd probably want that. But I mean, you can always copy what you're doing anyway and paste it. So there you go. For me, I would turn it off to save resources, okay?
Fine.
So if we go to the next one along, which is the interface, there's nothing much in here apart from scale your font. You can change the font size and scale it to the user interface. If you've got a high-res monitor, you're going to need to do that. Otherwise, as we've said, I mean, I've got them on large, but to be honest, they're still quite small. I don't know how you guys find them, but there you go. That's all you need to do
I think I
there.
changed mine, but not that way. Well, I can't remember how I did it.
Oh dear. Old age again, Brian.
Uh,
The other things, you can please yourself what you do. I mean, they're just different colors or, you know, it's really just shades of gray on your background. So that's all personal. Oh, I suppose we ought to mention these other things. Obviously, if you don't have many resources, you're probably better off turning these border things off and so on, because, you know, it doesn't take up much resources, but they do take up resources for drop shadows and stuff, you know. So it's worth turning it off if you don't have a computer with a lot of resources. Next tab up is the tools menu. I've highlighted the two ones that I see as being important. Although, you know, others may see it differently, but I like to use the shift key for switching between tools so that I don't have to keep foraging in the menu for it. I can show you what I mean if I select a brush tool by clicking on the B, I just click B on the keyboard. If I want to switch to another brush like a pencil, I can just switch between the four settings by using the shift on the B. So it's B for brush, and if I want to switch to one of the other three types of brushes, I just press the shift B, which gets me the pencil and the color replacement brush and so on. So, I mean, I find that quite useful. Okay.
There's one there that I use that you haven't got ticked.
What's that?
I use the mouse mostly, though I've now got your old whacker and I'm having a go with it at times. But the zoom with the scroll wheel on your mouse.
Yeah,
If
well,
you're
you can.
if you're doing point sharpening and things like that, you just spin your wheel on the mouse by ticking that one, and it's great. Instead going to the zoom control, you can do it with a wheel on the mouse by ticking that one,
Yeah,
which is what that's it. Yeah, like that.
well, you can
But
do
how
it.
did you do that then, Peter?
I press the Alt button
Okay,
and just scroll it in and out.
yeah.
So
And I just
there's a tons of different ways of doing it. What I'm saying here is these are what I use, but I think the important ones are the two I've shown, only because that's what I use. I mean,
yeah,
you may
yeah.
choose to disable or not the other things. I mean, the show reference point in the transform is useful, I find. You know what I mean by that?
Not certain.
Okay. If I I'll press M for marquee, which brings up the marquee tool, or one of the marquee tools. And as it happens, there isn't and now if I want to transform that and I press Control T, you can see in the middle there you've got a little marker. Can you see the reference point there?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about that is, I mean, normally it pops up in the middle, but if you move that, that means you can rotate it round the point wherever you put that point, rather than it being in the middle all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why
But
I
it's
prefer.
a
Sorry.
bit more than free transform then. That's the
Well,
only way I use it. I use free transform quite often. If I put a watermark on, I
yeah.
can move them and shove them and make them fit in nicely.
Well, yeah. I mean, but yeah, that's slightly different. I mean, I mean, I was only meaning for the moon. If you can just grab that and transform it, as you say.
Yeah.
But whatever turns you on, anyway. As I say, that's why I have that checked. The other things, well, I don't usually have the arrow keys checked, but it doesn't matter whether you do. I mean, I don't know about you, but as photographers, we probably only ever use the round brush anyway, so there's not much point rotating it. These others, if you don't have many resources, you might choose to uncheck them because they do take up resources. So it all depends on your computer.
So
Okay.
by default, Peter, would all those be unchecked or
No, I think they're checked, Martin.
they're checked? Okay.
I'm not absolutely certain, but I think you'll find most of them checked, I think.
Yeah, they are, Martin.
Okay.
So, depending on what you've got and what your needs are, you might choose to do something different. Okay, we'll go to file handling. So that's the ones I use, or the ones I find important. Although Martin might find that one important. Ignore rotation metadata. You had fun with that, didn't you, Martin, with the
I had
stars?
trouble with that with a load of files I was sent, from Robert's school, and
I had
it
a bit of
was
a laugh over that, but after you'd finished, of course.
okay. I've never visited these pages in my life, so
Okay.
I'm learning. But yeah, it was really weird because
Well,
things look fine in certain programs, and in other programs, things
what
are upside
happens
down
is
and sideways.
you take a picture with a mobile phone. I think most of them, you know, in the metadata, it rotates whether it was taken vertically or horizontally.
Yeah.
So that goes into the metadata. So when you import into Photoshop and you're trying to rotate it back, when you save it, if that's still in the metadata, it'll whip the other way again.
Okay, so it all makes sense now.
Yeah.
Great.
So if you just check that, ignore rotation, if you
Yeah.
take one horizontally or vertically, that's the way it'll come up in Photoshop, and then you can put it the way you want it and do it in there. Anyway, that's a bit of fun, isn't it?
What's the ask before saving layer TIFF files?
Okay, well,
And to imagine that.
well, it can be a pain, I suppose, but the way I work, I mean, I more or less always, as soon as I've opened the TIFF file, because I save from RAW, I save it as a TIFF.
Yeah.
And then I open that in Photoshop and save it then on a different disk. But if I forget to do that, and I go to close it or whatever, or save it, it reminds me that it's a TIFF, not a PSD file. That's the only reason I have it set there. It's just as a reminder for me when I forget to save it as a PSD.
What annoys me at times, and why I picked that one out, is whenever I save something, it wants to save it as a PSD, and I don't want to save it as a PSD. I want to save it as a TIFF. And it annoys me to hell because I don't know how to change the default in which it would offer you when you go to the save as or save.
It's all the question of the way you work, Brian,
Yeah.
isn't it? You know, I mean, as I say, I know if I save from RAW into TIFF, right, and then I convert those files into PSDs when I work on them in Photoshop. So I always know the TIFF files, I can delete them, because the ones I'm going to save, the ones I want to keep, are in PSD format. So then I can just go back and delete all the TIFF files. And it's not a problem. I mean, I never otherwise save anything as a TIFF. The only time I save as a TIFF is from the RAW. Okay. Up at the top, image previews, I never save them because I always work from Bridge or Photoshop anyway. I mean, if I'm opening a file, generally I'm opening it from Explorer and I know the file name, or I'm opening it from Bridge when I can see the preview anyway. So I choose not to save because it just bulks out the file. Okay, the other one is your automatic save recovery information. I've got it disabled at the moment. I don't know what you guys do. I expect you've got it to save every 5 minutes, haven't you?
10 minutes.
I wouldn't know.
I think the default is every 10 minutes.
Please.
That's it then.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll just leave that a second because we'll come to that in a minute as to why I would do that. And the other thing is these two other items here: maximize PSD and PSB file compatibility. I've got it set to never. I don't know what you guys have got it set to.
Ask.
Ask. Well, and when it asks, what do you do?
I don't know. I'm just saying that's what it's come up as on my screen.
So when it asks you, what do you do? You don't do anything.
I can't. Never known to ask.
Okay. And the other thing I've got there is I've got disable compression of PSD and PSB files. Right?
Yep.
I expect you've got it unchecked. So as a default, it's compressing the files, yes?
Yep.
Okay. So this is a comparison of what happens. I've taken two files. The top one is the standard compressed file, 1.6 gigabytes. The second is uncompressed file, which is 3.1 gigabytes. And with compatibility mode in, that's, this thing here, maximize compatibility.
Yeah.
With that engaged, then it goes up to 3.7 gigabytes. It's not always the same. If you look at this one of Lucy underneath, she starts off 339 megabytes compressed, 1.1 gigabytes uncompressed, and it jumps to 1.8 gigabytes if you've got compatibility engaged. So you really, unless you open your Photoshop files in an earlier Photoshop program that doesn't support the things that are working in the latest version that you're working on, you really want to get rid of it. I mean, if you wanted to open it in some other Photoshop program, sorry, not Photoshop, Adobe program, I don't know, InDesign or something like that, you may have to have it checked. I don't know. I never opened them in InDesign, so I wouldn't know. But that's the only time you'd need. What Photoshop does, it saves a saves a flattened layer in the file. Yeah, so it flattens it and saves this as a layer so that some other programs can see it. That would probably apply to some file viewers as well. You know, I mean, if you were using AC/DC, it may not see it unless it had the compatibility there. But anyway, it does use up space, so my advice is not to use it. Yeah?
Yeah.
Any questions?
No.
The file name is PSB rather than PSD. What's that actually mean?
Yeah, PSD file only saves up to 2 gigabytes. Once you get beyond 2 gigabytes, you need to save it as a PSB file. It has a slightly different format for saving it. I'm not sure why. I don't know. I've never asked the question. There you go. Now, if we move on to timings. So this is, oh, I haven't put it on there, but you can see that's a compressed file. So that's the Porlock file, 1.6 gigabytes compressed. And over here, the uncompressed version is 3.1 gigabytes. So when you open it, it takes 3 seconds, the uncompressed. The compressed file takes 19 seconds. You see that?
Yeah.
So basically what they divide one into the other, that shows the NVMe drive that it's saving to is doing 1256 megabytes a second, whereas when you save it compressed, it's only doing 121 megabytes a second. And the reason for that is the processing time. It's the processing overhead that's causing it. And if you look at, I've looked at what's happening when it doesn't, and it's only using one of the cores, right? So, I mean, this machine's got 12 cores, a processor with 12 cores, but when it's compressing it, it's only using one core. So that's why it's being bottlenecked by the compression at the compression stage with the processor. So that's quite a big difference.
Sure is.
And that's why I was saying, let me just go back to the file handling. So over here, I have disabled compression checked so that it doesn't do any compressing, so that it saves faster. So let me just go back. Now, remember that this machine, do you want me to open that file so you can see the difference if you don't believe it?
Yeah. Yeah, why not?
Okay, so here's the, can you read those there?
Yeah.
That bottom one is the uncompressed at 1.6 gigabytes. This one is the uncompressed at 3.1, and that's the 3.7. We won't bother with that one, that's the compatibility. Let me start a stopwatch. If I hit this one and this one at the same time, more or less, I've got to do that one first.
We're still seeing your time.
Ah,
My what?
Or
We
it's
were
just
we were
stuck in there.
still only seeing your timing figures rather than anything else. But
Oh,
We are now.
I wonder why that is.
Went back.
Yeah.
Can you see that?
Yeah, we're just seeing your timing figures.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's weird. Oh, I know. Hang on. I wonder if I can. Still can't see it, can you?
No.
I see. It's because the screen is set to.
you need to share a different option in your screen. I expect. I don't know if other people got the same, but I just got a glimpse of an image and then it disappeared
Yeah.
again.
Yes,
Me too.
yeah, I did as well.
Yeah.
I can't actually see. I can't get the. Oh, hang on. I wonder if it. I wonder if I. Oh no, that stops the share, doesn't it? That's no good. And then if I share it
Go
again,
back into share and choose the bit that you want to
yeah,
share with us.
I can't find it now. Oh, there it is. Okay. Well, it's not really going to help actually because I need to. Well, if I'll tell you what. All I can do is tell you when I press it. I can only. You'll have to do the timing. I'll tell you when I press the enter key to upload that file. Yes. And in the meantime, I'll stop that share and go back to. Oh, oh, that's weird, isn't it?
Got both now.
We've got them. We've got it. We've got it now. I'll bet when I. Ah, okay. Can you see it now?
Yep.
No.
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 Oh, well, what do you mean by see it? We can see your
No.
your timings, and your file list and your stopwatch. That's what we can see.
Well, you can see that, and oh, I see.
Let's give it
Which
a
is
miss. We'll
weird, isn't it?
believe you.
Yeah, we'll believe you, Peter.
Well, if
Now you
I
know now you know the trouble I was getting with Decentra, don't you?
yeah, if I get rid of that, try it again. Okay, I'm gonna press on it now. You should see it pop up here. You know, you should see at least the name pop up if you can't see the picture. Yes.
All right then, go on.
Uh, right, I'm going to do it now.
Yeah.
That was a compressed file loading. Okay.
I was stood beside you when you took that.
I know you were. Now we'll go to the uncompressed file. Yeah. I'm gonna unload it now.
Yeah.
There's a substantial difference, isn't there?
Yeah.
And if you're using a hard drive, and that's you know, the two hard drives on my desk. If I save it to the hard drive, then the difference jumps quite a bit. Um, it's you can see that from the specs here, the 80 megabits a second and the 97. It's near enough maxing out the hard drive's read and write speed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's going to take 3 seconds to open it on the NVMe drive, 32 seconds on the hard drive, and when it comes to saving on the hard drive, it's 96, 102 on the compressed. And the reason for that is the overhead of the processor compressing it isn't making a huge difference to the save time. Yeah?
Yep.
The opening time is a little bit different, but you can see the NVMe drive is a lot faster saving and opening and saving than the hard drive. And I just also did, what did I do? Yeah, I saved it also on the hard drive on my net machine, which is a Core i5. And again, you can see that on the uncompressed file, there's not a lot of difference. It's a bit slower, the Core i5 machine, because it's it's just got a bit more. Takes a little bit longer to do it. The compressed one is quite a bit longer, at 30 odd seconds longer, and a bit longer on the open. So it's a bit slower because it's the processor's a bit slower, and all three together. But that's quite a difference. I mean, if you don't have a really fast drive to save on, then you're going to suffer quite a bit. And let's see. So if we go back to file handling, if it's disabled, you're going to get a reasonably fast save, unless you're saving to a standard hard drive, in which case it's damn slow. And of course, up here, if you're automatically saving recovery information every 5 or 10 minutes, that's going to take up quite a few resources on your machine, isn't it? Hello? Yes, does that make sense?
Yep, doesn't me.
It's going to take up a lot of resources if you save it all the time. So either disable it or set it to 30 minutes or something. Or if you get to a point in your file where you think it's appropriate to have a save, just to save yourself. I mean, you don't have to. I mean, what I do is I save them. Hang on, what's the next one? Yeah, scratch this. Well, we'll come to how I do the. Oh, I suppose we could do that now if I hang on. So this is how I work on the machine, yeah. I've got these drives on the machine. So I've got a boot drive, which is it's 400 gig, it's 500 gig drive. I've got a 500 gig drive for RAWs and process TIFFs, and I've got a 500 gig drive for the PSDs. And I also put the scratch disk on this second drive, and I've got another user file, G, which is a terabyte drive, which is a slower NVMe drive, a slower M2 drive, slower, cheaper drive, because that mostly takes the documents and stuff, and I might push some files over to there before I put them onto the backup disk. So mainly I'm working on these. I mean, the boot drive just does the booting and running the programs. The scratch disk goes on to the TIFF file. These are all 3 NVMe drives. I import the raw files onto this one here, the PSD raw disk. And then when I take them into the raw processor, I save them onto this second drive here. And then when I process the actual TIFF file, I save it back into this drive as a Photoshop file. That means that the scratch disk and the Photoshop are running on different drives. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And then when I've completed, the raw files and the Photoshop files can go out to the external hard drive. And I've got two pairs of those, and I back up from one to the other every well, I don't know, a couple of months or so. I mean, you don't want to leave data stagnant on a hard drive because on magnetic media it starts decaying from when you put them on there. So I like to keep them refreshed by doing I mean that docking station that you saw me using for the 2 hard drives, it's a disk duplicator as well. You can disconnect it from the PC, press a button, and it'll back up the whole disk, copy the whole disk from one to the other. So you've always got nice fresh data on the disk, and you're not worried about magnetic degradation spoiling your files. Any questions on that one?
Do you swap those storage drives over, Peter? So that you use one back out initially, and then you use that one to back the other one up.
Yeah, yeah. I
Do you
duplicate.
physically change them over to do that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, normally I've got in that duplicator, I've got one of the photo drives. If you look down here, that's called photo disk A, and I've got a raw disk R on B on there. So
Yeah.
I normally have those in there, so I can switch them on and get to the Photoshop files or the raw files whenever I want. And when I want to do it, when I've copied a lot of files onto the backup disk, if it's the raw files I'm copying, I take the photo disk out and put the other raw one in, do a copy, and then I'll leave the new copy in the duplicator and put the old raw one into into a case, and I just keep rotating them like that,
Makes me feel totally inadequate.
And I do the same with the photos. So I just rotate them. So, because you can't trust magnetic data on a hard drive. I know they'll tell you it's going to last for 10 years or whatever, but a hard drive can fail on startup at any time. It's a mechanical device, and if it fails on startup, you're stuffed. But not if you've got a second disk already written.
How about disk sizes then, Peter? Are there
Yeah,
any
so-
sort of optimum sizes that you should be using, or
Well, I just go for, well, on the external drives, I've got 2 4-terabyte drives. They're okay at the moment. And it's they're reasonably priced. I'll probably up them to 6-terabyte drives at some point, but at the moment not. On the NVMe drives, I mean, you've got SSD drives, and you've got M2 drives, and you've got M2 NVMe drives going the rounds. Obviously, the SSD drives are the cheapest, but they're also the slowest. Then there's also M2 SATA drives, which are similar to the SSD drives, and then you've got a couple of different sorts of NVMe. You've got NVMe PCI Express 3 and NVMe PCI Express 4. These happen to be the faster drives. The first 3 are the faster drives, and the fourth one, which is disk 3,
you're going a little bit faint, Peter?
Okay, sorry, I'm moving about. The one here, which is called disk 3, which is the fourth drive, that's a slower NVMe drive because I don't, it's not critical particularly. I'm only saving small files to it. These other 3, they're PCIe 4 drives, but PCI 3 drive is perfectly adequate. Size-wise, on the basic, the disk drive 0, which is a boot drive, I normally don't put anything bigger than 250 in there. I mean, a 120 will run Windows, but you're better off a bit bigger with solid state drives because, for the oh crikey, what does it call it? The trim and the over provisioning. You need over provisioning on them to keep them working efficiently. I mean, you never really want to go beyond about 70% full on a SSD, a solid state drive, otherwise you start to lose a lot of performance. But I could only get the 500 gigs at the time, so but I would normally only have a 250 in there. The other two don't matter. I've got a 500 and a 1 terabyte one in there. It really just depends how many files you want to save on that third drive until you have to swap them out to the external backup.
Yeah. Okay. Now, how about manufacturers then? I got quite sort of concerned because when I was looking around at what manufacturer to buy for hard drives,
Yeah.
you could get bad reports on almost any of them.
Yeah, you can. I mean, we went through a situation once, I don't know, about 20, 25 years ago, I don't know, where we had hard drives failing after just a few months use, tons of them, I mean loads of them. And what it is, I mean, they all use the same chips. And there was a bad bunch of chips which went in just about everybody's drives, so everybody's drives were failing. We wondered what was going on at first because there were never any complaints. We used to send the disc back, with return discs, a bunch of them, and never any complaints, no questions, where normally if you try and return something for replacement, it's a marathon to get it done, isn't it? And there was no questions asked, they just swap them over. And it was because there was this bunch of bad chips had gone into them, and they didn't know which discs, which drives had got them and which hadn't. So they were just replacing them as soon as you asked. And that's the same today. You just don't know. The only way you try and protect yourself is by an enterprise drive. But you'll find an enterprise hard drive is several times the price of an ordinary one.
Or you have a process which means that you lose any one of your drives, you haven't lost everything, and you've got files in other places.
Exactly. Which is why I use 2 pairs of backup drives for the backups, because you can't trust one drive,
Okay, thank you.
And it won't matter to you until you lose a drive, and then then you'll be sick.
Well, I think it was Phil Naylor a few years ago went and bought 2 or 3 drives,
Yeah.
and he decided to put all his photos on one and all his documents on another,
Yeah.
and he lost years and years worth of photographs.
It happens. It happens. I always used to, when we were, as you know, I started early in computing, and we're putting architectural seats in design, AutoCAD then it was. And we were banged on about having backups, and it was quite hard to convince people to do backups until they lost something, and then they were complaining at us because we hadn't made it clear enough. You won't bother about backups until you lose it, and then you'll be paranoid about it. Okay. So where were we? Oh yes, what I was saying is, what I tend to do, I have this disabled, but when I want to save to the hard drives, right, I'll change this to save compressed, because obviously I'm more concerned about the space on the hard drives.
Yeah.
I mean, if I save the uncompressed files, it's going to take a hell of a lot of space. But what I do is I'll do a batch save, and you can make this into a little action. Just create an action, go into the preferences, untick it so that it's a compressed save, and have another action to re-enable it. So you can just click the action and just click the arrow, and it'll change it from one to the other. Everybody know how to make actions? Hello?
Yeah.
Does everybody know that? Are we happy with that?
Not really.
Okay, well, I can do a quick one.
It's just stringing various things together, isn't it, and getting it to record it so it's recoverable to do it again.
So if you got your actions panel up and you click on the plus sign, I've got compression disabled. So if I put compression enable, okay, and click record, then down here you'll see the button's gone to record, and then all you need to do is edit, preferences, file handling, isn't it? Unclick the box, say OK, and then go down here and stop it recording. That's all you do. And then if you want to run it again, well, you'd have to make another one now. Let's make another one. Compression disable. We enabled the other one, didn't we? Okay. And then we go in, edit, oops, preferences, file handling, and disable the compression. So okay.
Yeah.
Click OK and click that. And then you can just click that, and then if you click this arrow here with whichever one you want to enable, it'll just run and do it for you. So you don't need to be going in, you can just do simple, yeah?
Yep.
Anyway, I think that's, what was I going to say? That's about
Getting a
it.
bit deep.
Sorry?
Getting in a bit deep now.
Well, not really, Brian. I mean, it's things, I mean, actions are very simple. I mean, it's just, you just record what you've done and replay it. That's all you do. But I think you should be able to see the advantage of using compression or not using compression, and maybe turning it off when you do a backup. All depends what disk drives you've got and how long it's going to take you, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, the difference between the sort of 20 seconds and the 3 seconds was quite impressive, wasn't it? But when it's a difference between 27 and 34,
Not
it becomes
much.
marginal, doesn't it?
That's right. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
when you say the difference between 27 and 34, you're looking here on the hard drive, yeah?
Yeah.
At the bottom one, yeah. Yes, it's less it's less obvious because it's going to take so long, but look at the saving time, 131 seconds and 102 seconds. You know,
Yeah.
you've got to sit there
Yeah.
twiddling your thumbs while it's doing it. And if you've got it doing automatic saves as well, it's gobbling up resources, isn't it?
It all adds up, doesn't it?
Well,
Okay, Peter. It's 8:30 now. Should we have a 5-minute
yep.
replenish our glasses or whatever we want to do? Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. 5 minutes.
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Okay. All right. See you soon.
Thank you.
Especially. Yeah, I mean, that's what Adobe say. I mean, basically what they're saying there, if your scratch drive is a hard drive, then you really need a faster SSD drive to put your scratch drive on. Because for reasons that we've already seen in the timings and that, it's going to take a hell of a long time. I mean, Photoshop is writing to the scratch disk all the time, and it can write, you know, large amounts of data. They also say it should be on a different drive than the one the operating system is using for virtual memory, which is probably on the C drive. And it should be on a different drive to the files you're editing. So, so to fulfill all those, you really need 1, 2, 3 SSDs in order to separate the scratch drive from the program drive. Because obviously, when Windows is running, it's using the virtual drive, writing data to that. You don't want it writing data to that to the scratch drive on the same drive at the same time. So that's, you know, why we need to separate them if we possibly can. And it is doable. I mean, even if you have a hard drive machine, you can get cheap SSDs these days. Okay, they're not an NVMe drive, they're not fine, but they will write up to 500 megasecond compared to, say, 100 meg or less for a hard drive. So they are 5 times as fast, so it's a worthwhile look. And they don't cost very much. I mean, I can't remember what a 120 SSD is now. Probably get 50 quid or something like that.
We're losing your sound, Peter.
Sorry.
So
So it is doable. The thing fell over. Is that any better? Is that any better, Keith?
Yes, that's
Yeah,
better.
yeah,
Yeah, thank
better.
you.
Okay, so obviously in your preferences there, scratch this, you stick it on the fastest drive you've got available. And in my case, it's the E drive, which has got 260 gigabytes free. So that's fine. You can see there that Photoshop supports up to 64 exabytes of scratch disk. So they're obviously expecting the scratch disk to get quite large. Although I can't see anybody ever using 64 exabytes of it. Okay. Performance. Now, obviously, I mean, Photoshop will now let you use 100%. I mean, you can up that to 100%, but that might leave you might break your computer doing that. Break it in the fact that you crash it, I mean, not doing any terminal damage. Because obviously Windows, depends how many other things you're running in Windows. If you're running, you know, your File Explorer, the Internet and Word and another program, you're going to need some memory spare. So that's up to you what you use. Really on this machine, I tend only to be running Photoshop and Bridge. I have another machine which I use for internet and email and stuff. So mainly so that I don't have to put this machine on the internet and get any problems coming back from the internet. But there we go. So give it as much as you possibly can, depending on what sort of RAM you've got. Graphics processor, you're better off if you've got a separate graphics card to use in the graphics on board the chips, because obviously they don't have any extra RAM on the onboard graphics processors, and the NVIDIA are the best. They always write better drivers for Photoshop than AMD, for instance. So yeah, you want to use the graphics processor on your video card if you possibly can afford one. So I thought I did. Oh yeah. History states, you can go up to 1,000 history states. It depends what you want to do. Again, it depends to some extent. Obviously, the more history states you save, the bigger your scratch drive's going to be. So you're using more resources, the more history states you've got. So it's up to you. I think Photoshop defaults to 20 states. So
50, 50.
30, is it? Yeah.
Oh, 50, 50.
50, okay. Well, I've shoved mine up to 500 because I've got plenty of resources to go at. I'm not bothered about the size of the scratch disk. It can get as big as it wants. Cache levels, set it to 6 for the size of files we're usually doing. I would say that you want to go to 6. It helps with redraw speeds. Cache tile size, oh, again, 1024 is what you want. There are some funny ones in there. If you just see preferences. Oh,
Gone again.
what's gone?
Your voice.
Okay. Yeah, there's some. I was saying there's some funny ones in here. 132 and 1028. Never set it to that. Um, at one time, there was a problem with the onboard cache and stuff on the Intel processors, but it's going back quite a while now. So you never want to set it to any of those settings. The 128 and the 1028, they're weird settings that you really don't want to use. But I would just stick it at 1024 and you should be fine. Okay. I don't think there's anything else to say about that, apart from the fact, of course, that the more RAM you have, the better. I mean, you can't really have enough RAM for Photoshop if you're doing large files. Not so bad if you're using JPEGs and stuff and you never do any printing and the like, but other than that. But as I said, history states gobble up RAM and they gobble up the scratch disk, so you have to decide between performance and utility. If you consolidate layers often, you can get away with using fewer history states. So I mean, that's a useful way of saving resources. So cache states, well, Photoshop uses the cache states to increase responsiveness. Images might take longer to load, but it does improve the speed once you're loaded. The tile size, I mean, that determines what size of what block of data Photoshop works on at a time. So you don't want it too small. So as I say, with the files we're likely to be using, you probably want 1024. Okay, just moving on to the GPU, which again is part of it. That's why you need a GPU if you can possibly afford it, because it accelerates also, takes the load off the main processor basically, and does a lot of stuff on board the GPU rather than leaving it all to the main processor, which frees up for doing other things. And then there's a ton of stuff that you really do need a GPU to work with. Let's look. I can find. It's weird. Oops. Sorry, just having a bit of a hiccup here. That's odd. Hang on with me, I can't work out why this. There we are. Don't know what happened there, but it wouldn't bring up the screen. Those are the features that absolutely won't work if you don't have a GPU. Some of them we don't really care about, but things like scrubby zoom and bird's eye viewing, flick panning, and so on, smooth brush, that makes quite a difference to the Photoshop experience. As I say, you're not likely to be using, well, you might use perspective warp. You probably don't use 3D or oil paint, but the others you could use. And then these features absolutely require a GPU for acceleration. So if you're not using a GPU, those things are relatively slow. Okay.
Yep.
Moving on then. Cursors, well, pretty much up to you what you're doing here. I usually have the crosshair showing and I use a full-size brush tip, but you know, really up to you. Really up to you how you work that one. Units and rulers, this can be important. If you've got an Epson printer, you want to set this to 360 ppi. If you've got a Canon printer, you want that to set to 300 ppi. And you want to set the screen resolution the same as whatever resolution of your monitor. My monitor happens to have 109 ppi screen res rather than the normal 72. A lot of the modern monitors, most of them you'll find have a better than 72 ppi. If you don't set that, it doesn't make a huge difference except for your print previews. Your prints won't look the same size as they ought to, you know, when you use your print preview. So best to set those to where they want to be. Yeah?
Yeah.
Everybody happy?
Yeah.
Oh. I managed to put a dot on the screen, haven't I? Never mind. We'll get there in a minute. Oh, I don't know. Won't bother. Anyway, technology preview screen. I don't know why I haven't got that bottom one checked. It should be checked. It should be the other way around, actually. The top one doesn't matter unless you're using some sort of touch screen, but you should enable the bottom one, enable preserve details. I wonder why I've got that like that. Yeah, it should be like that. You know, that's the AI thing. You know, everybody, all these upscaling programs these days, they're all using AI, aren't they? So they say. It's the buzzword, it's the in thing. But anyway, Photoshop does a much better job now if you use the preserve details too when you're enlarging something. So you need to enable that in this screen for it to work or to be offered as a choice when you come to upscale anything. You want to try it, it does a better job than the old one. Where are we now? Menus. You know that you can disable stuff in the menus or enable them. If you look in the file menu, I suppose I should say, that's here, edit menus, yeah? And then you've got file, edit, image, whatever, all the different menus. And you can enable or disable various things. I mean, I never use the new thing or the open thing or the browsing bridge or open as or open smart object. So I just disable them because they just clutter up my menu system. You've also got the option for putting different colors on. I don't usually, but I thought, well, just to show willing, I'd do it. So if I look at my actual file menu, you can see it's quite short. And I happen to put those two in green. I use scripts quite a bit. Open recent I use, so that's there, but all the rest are gone. But whenever you disable something in the menu, you get this additional item at the bottom that says show all menu items. So you can always, if you found that you put something off that you really wanted, you can temporarily put the screen on. When you go back next time, it'll be back to what you set it. But it's quite handy. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the menus that you'll never use, and you can always get them back if you need to, but it might speed up you getting to some of the things in the menu. Keyboard shortcuts. Again, edit keyboard shortcuts is there. And those are all the shortcuts. Now, I use keyboard shortcuts quite a lot. I don't know whether you guys do or not, but you can change them, and I've changed quite a few of them. I put this one up because you can see, that for increase and decrease the brush size, it's the square brackets keys, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you'll increase with the square bracket keys. Well, because I'm using a tablet, I've got the pen in my right hand. It's a bit of a stretch with my left hand to get to those keys. So I've switched them to the WE keys. So that's why decrease brush is W and increase is E. So it's a lot easier for me to get to the WE keys, and it's next to the rotate key, so it's much more comfortable to do that. So that is something that you might want to look at, doing things like that. If something doesn't suit you, you can change it, which is good, isn't it? Well, I think it's good. I mean, I don't know. Do you use shortcuts, brush a lot, or do you guys use the shortcuts?
Yeah, I
No,
do.
not really.
I'm getting there gradually. I've read a few recently.
Oh, there's quite a lot of them. I mean, it's quite easy. I mean, you only need to learn a dozen or so, and there's all sorts of things that you can do. I mean, if we bring up the brush, I get the brush enabled. The other thing you can do, you've got these things up here. You can use the numerical keys to change the opacity. Yeah, do you know those? Do you see it changing up the top? Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite useful, and you can change the flow by using shift and hitting a key. Yeah, so that's useful. It saves you mucking about. I mean, obviously you can use the scrubby zoom as well, and all sorts of things to do it. But sometimes it's easier to do it that way than start moving your mouse around to find something. What did I do here? Oh, popular shortcuts. Well, those are some of the ones you might want to use. Control T for free transforming. Toggle between erasing and painting with the same brush. That's the graph key just under the escape key. If you've got a tablet, you probably don't need to do that because you've got an eraser on the pen. So brackets keys, well, I just mentioned those. I've changed that to a W and an E to make it easier for me, and the other two bracket keys for brush hardness. But there again, I mean, yeah, there's other ways to do these things. If you've got your, let's see, I'm just trying to think. I do it differently because I've got a tablet. I use the tablet to change the thing. But if you've got let's say you've got the brush enabled, if you right click anywhere on the screen, it pops up with the size and the hardness. Yeah, so you can change the hardness or the size of the brush with that, or you can hold the Alt key, hold down your Alt key and right click with your mouse, and you can change the softness of the brush by dragging up and down, and you can change the size by dragging left and right. So that can be quite a quick way of doing things. Anybody use that?
Yes.
Quite handy, Tom, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, it is.
I have to struggle to remember what you did with the mouse because I used the tablet to do it. What other things can we say? How about if you're working on an image, let's say you want you're using the brush to do something, but you want to move somewhere else. If you hold the H key down, that's the H key, and left click on the screen, you get a little box up. It zooms out and you get a little box up, and you can move straight to a different area, and you still have your brush selected or whatever else you were using. So H key and the left key on the mouse, and you can go to a different area, which can be quite useful. Yeah, anybody use that one?
No.
You won't find it documented anywhere in Photoshop that I know of. I've never seen any documented. It's just if somebody tells you it.
Put that beauty spot in.
Sorry?
Did you put that beauty spot on?
No, she's got that. That's what Lucy is. That's what she has, and I don't think she likes it being taken out. That's an image I was going to use originally. I was going to do a touching up one. I don't mean touching up the girl. You know what I mean. We decided to do this instead. I don't know what else to say about this. Oh yes, I do. Brushes. Brushes. Yeah, we need to talk about brushes. Let me go back to this one. Okay, that's the brush settings. Well, actually, we can. Well, so you can change the hardness and you can choose the spacing there. Now, I'll have to let me bring up the
What
window.
is the spacing exactly, Peter?
Well, I'm going to show you just now. If I bring up the actual brush and if I magnify it, try and magnify it, the spacing, how your brush draws, you might not realize, but it draws little dots. And according to how you're spacing, that's you set the dots. So if you have the dot spacing small enough, then you start to lose the ragged edge, yes? So if you've got a big spacing, you'll be able to see each brush stroke, because each part of the brush stroke as you drag it. So you want a low spacing. I mean, you'd presumably say, oh, well, I'll set it to 0. But if you do that, what happens is you really slow your computer down. It takes up a lot of resources to do that. So can't remember what Photoshop recommend, but anywhere between 10 and 20 should do you. And actually the same thing applies to the hardness of the brush. If you set your hardness to 0, in other words, maximum softness, that gobbles up resources and slows your computer down. And then when you're using, when you're painting, you'll get a thickening of the brush stroke at the end of each stroke backwards and forwards. I can demonstrate that, I think, if you... try and demonstrate it. Let me get rid of that. If I control N to bring up to make a new file, and if we do, oh, there's preserved details too in there. So that becomes an option for you if you enlarge it. Doesn't really matter in this file, but let's enlarge it by 500%. That was to make it. No, let's make it. I just want to make it large enough that it's going to demonstrate what happens with the brush. Oops. See what happened there? I started drawing here, and if I draw quickly, it takes ages for the brush to catch up. That's because we've got these settings, the hardness at 0. Well, I have the spacing at 16. Let's change that to that.
Wow.
And that makes it quite difficult if you're trying to do operate on small details. So it's going to take a while to catch up.
Peter, is there a way to reset the brush if you've cocked it up?
In what way? What if you cock this up?
Yes, yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, you just open the brush settings and change it back. I mean, open your brush settings, set it to, let's say 20%, and just take your hardness away from 0, and then it's still slow, but it's a lot faster in this one. And obviously, if it was a normal sized image, you wouldn't notice. I mean, I set it to 81,000 pixels by 500, so I mean, it's fairly large, isn't it? If I make that a more reasonable size. See, it's getting quicker. And if what's our normal sizes, guys? About 9,000 is, whoops, 9,000 is about where the Sony is at the moment, isn't it? So if we draw it now, you see that the speed is okay. But that's so when you set this, set it somewhere between 10 and 20% spacing, and you don't change that. The only way to change that spacing is to come into the brush settings. So once you've set it, it's not going to change, but find the setting that works best for you, and remember that if you take the hardness to 0, you're going to have the same problem. So just have it somewhere where you can't see the edges of the brush stroke, but it's soft enough for what you want. Yeah?
Yeah.
The other thing that a lot of people don't seem to appreciate is the difference between opacity and flow. Can you hear me all right? I keep moving away from the microphone.
Not too bad.
Sorry?
Not too bad. We can hear okay. You do drift off now and again.
Yeah, I keep turning around. I didn't want to put the headphones on because it's so hot. It was really uncomfortable, so I've just got it sat on the desk in front of me. I keep knocking it to one side. Opacity is pretty obvious, isn't it? I mean, if your opacity is 100%, then
It's strong.
then your brush is going to do. And if your opacity is lower, it's going to be less opacity. I normally have it set to 100%, but I have the smoothing. If you have the flow. If you have the flow set to 100%, same thing. Now, the difference between the two, if we've got 100% flow and 100% opacity, if I draw a line, nothing, it just draws the same line, doesn't it? You know, I mean, no matter how often you go over the same spot, you draw them with 100% value. And if you reduce the opacity, same thing. You can build up opacity by crossing over the strokes, but if you just paint in the same line, it makes no difference. It just paints whatever the opacity is.
Oh.
If, however, let me just undo those items. If we change the flow, let's say we change it to 30%. Now, when I draw the line, when I go back, it slays down more. So you can gradually lay down. I mean, I would normally have that probably right down at less than 10%, because you've got more control over how you lay the colour down. So you can build up a depth of what you're trying to do when you're dodging and burning or whatever you're doing. So that's what I'd say for you to use. 100% opacity with a low flow, generally. I mean, there are times where you'd want 100% flow, but, you know, generally that's how I'd work it, and gradually build up your color or the density of your mask using that. And remember to keep your spacing 10 to 20%, and try not to go right to zero. It depends. I mean, sometimes you can go to zero. Depends on your computer, depends on the image you're working on, and so on. Okay, those things are quite important, I think. Can't think of anything else, lads. Anything else? Any questions? Anything anyone wants to know? You've probably all gone to sleep by now.
We'll do a sound check.
What, for me or for the rest of you?
For all of them.
I think they're all asleep, Tom. Have I thoroughly bored you guys?
No, no. It's very good.
I got a question, Peter, about graphics cards.
Yes.
Now, most hardware that I've been able to fudge into this thing, obviously, I've been able to go to a website and tell it what I've got, and then it can check my computer and say, oh, yeah, this will go in there. Is there any kind of facility like that with graphics cards? Or when you select a graphics card, do you use any kind of software like that or website?
No. I mean, basically, if you're getting a graphics card for Photoshop, if your prime consideration is for Photoshop, then you just want a reasonably priced graphics card. I mean, I'm using an NVIDIA 1070. I go for NVIDIA products for Photoshop because their drivers are always better optimized for Photoshop than the AMD drivers. So I would always recommend that you go NVIDIA and try and get something. Well, I wouldn't go below a GTX 1030. You can buy a GTX 1030, I think, for about 75 quid. Better if you can get to a 1050 or a 1070 or better. Whether it'll go in your machine or not, I'm sure it will.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of space in there, but my concern is there ever any, say, compatibility issues with the graphics cards you got on, say, your motherboard?
Well, you need to check what your PCI Express slot is on your motherboard. I imagine that, I don't know how old your motherboard is. How old is your motherboard? Do you know?
Well, I bought the machine about 4 to 5 years ago, I think.
Well, I should imagine you've got PCI Express 2 on there at least. So your top slot will be a longer slot than the others, and it'll be PCI Express, and that'll take a graphics card. I mean, obviously we've got PCI Express 3 and PCI Express 4 now, which just means they've got bigger bandwidth to operate on, so it'll be faster. But any sort of PCI Express slot is going to give you an advantage if you put a GPU in there. Your best thing you can do is tell me what motherboard you've got. Do you know what your motherboard is?
Not offhand, but I have got it wrote down somewhere.
Okay, well just email me or messenger, and I'll look it up and tell you what you've got on there and whether it'll work or not.
Perfect, thank you.
Anybody else?
No.
I did put on the newsletter about setting up your workspace. I know you have the option for a number of different defaults.
Oh, I see.
When
Yeah.
you go to workspace, but I customized mine, and I wondered if people were aware of that.
Okay. Well, I imagine that most of people are, you're going to choose photography workspace, I should think. I mean, there'd be no reason not to, would there? And what happens is if you click photography workspace, I mean, you've seen where mine are. I mean, if I left, sorry, I took that off. If I left that brushes palette open there, when I shut the Photoshop down, when I start up again, that'll be there because it'll have saved it in the photography workspace. So what you do is you just simply do it, get the thing set up where you like it. I mean, I can't really show you mine because they're on that monitor alongside. I've got all the panels set up over there, so I can have more panels open, and they're not clogging up the my main workspace. But however you set it up, it'll reflect it in that setting when you open your machine next. I mean, you can move your things about. I mean, I like the main menu bar and the toolbar down on the right hand side of the screen because that takes up less space, and you can dock these screens. You see when it lights up when you move it in, so you can dock your screens up against the others. You can change the sizes, so, and you can have other, I mean, you can nest your actions in with that if you want, and you can nest other things in there. I mean, if you wanted your histogram in there, you could put that in there as well, so on. And whatever you change about, it will reflect. But I mean, what you can do is save that. Once you've got it set up the way you want it, you can just click New Workspace. I hope you can see that. Click New Workspace.
Yeah.
Give it a name, My Workspace or whatever you want, and that will come up then as a choice up here in your workspaces. So then you can choose a different workspace, but always get back to the one that you've got particularly set up for how you like to work. Make sense?
Yep.
Any others? Everybody must be happy. Okay, well, I mean, like I say, I probably bored you all to death on that one, but you did ask.
So what did you go out and take a photo of last night then, for Peter?
Oh, I did that. I did that for the stacking.
All right.
What I was going to, I mean, I don't, have we got time to go into stacking now?
No.
No.
That's 9.
Well, how long will it take?
I'm going to have
Couple of
to
hours.
anyway, guys.
Couple of hours.
Oh, I didn't save it. I went out and took, well, I can open the TIFF. I went out and took some pictures to demonstrate stacking. Let me see if, what did I, oh God, what did I call it? Oh no, I did it in the, that's where I did it.
Shall I suggest we run for another half an hour to 10 o'clock and then call it a day?
Yep. I did stacking images. I was going to go on to that next because that's what I was asked for. So the three main reasons for using stacking is that object removal, noise reduction, extended depth of field. Everybody know those?
Yep.
Yeah.
Anybody not know those?
Fine.
Not going to admit to it if you don't. So which would you like to look at?
Well, I'm confused on noise reduction because
No, go on, go on.
stacking could be additive or it could be taking things away. So how does it do noise reduction?
Okay. When you, let's see. when you take a picture at night, oh, hang on, I'm going to have to close those down. When you take a picture at night, you know, I don't know, you're in some exotic location like Paris or Venice or
Yeah.
wherever. In my case, sunny Bridgewater. I just need to see. I need to find. Oh, I should have shut those other files down. Okay, when you take a picture at night in your exotic location, you've left your tripod in your hotel or it's 2 miles away in the boot, so you're taking it handheld. Obviously, you're going to get a lot of noise. I mean, it's inevitable, isn't it? I took these at, well, I did 2 lots actually. So,
You're a
We're
bit
losing
faint,
your,
Peter.
hello?
we're losing your sound.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Okay.
But you get lots of noise, don't you? I mean, there's no
Yeah.
no choice for that. Actually, I'm going to forget this. I really need to. What I've done is I took 2 lots. That should be easier, I think. Like I said, so you're going to get a lot of noise. So the noise, because noise is random, it's going to be different on every picture, isn't it? So
Yeah.
if you go to File, Scripts, okay, and choose Load Files into Stack, and then Add Open Files. God, I must have saved some. Try again. Load Files into Stack.
We're not hearing you currently.
Sorry. I said I must have forgot to save some of them so that it wouldn't load them into the stack. You would click on Attempt to automatically align source images to make sure that obviously they're aligned. And also in this case, create Start Object, Smart Object, yeah? And then
Right.
click OK. And it'll, I wish I should have put the layers panel up for you to see. But at the moment, it's loading them loading them all as layers into the
So,
stack.
so what have you got there then, Peter? You've got half a dozen or so shots.
Yeah, I took 10.
10.
Yeah. So it's loaded them. Let me just, and it's created a smart object. So it's aligned the images and created a smart object. Yes?
Okay.
Everybody happy with that?
Okay. Yeah.
And then what we want to do is go into the layers, smart objects, and stack mode. And what you want to do is, well, mean and medium both work. Let's click on mean first. And if I click on one of the files.
So does mean average then in sort of layman's terms?
Exactly.
It's averaging out the.
It is, yeah. So that was the TIFF file, which is quite noisy, and the new file is a lot smoother. Yes.
Okay.
So that's what it's doing. I mean, it's because the noise is random. the bits of noise aren't the same on each picture. So it eradicates those. You can always go back into layer smart object stack mode and choose the median and let it go ahead and do it again so that you compare the two. And you can see they both do a similar job.
Okay. So if you were stacking for a macro image, you'd choose another way of merging them, would you?
Yes, yes. Well, let's shut all those down.
So doing what you've just done there, it's obviously cleaned up the noise, the ambient noise that's there, the random noise. Is that as good as some of the sort of standalone programs that you can get nowadays for noise reduction, or do they still have the edge?
It's different kettle of fish, Martin. I mean, a noise reduction program actually tries to find what it thinks is noise and eradicate it. And it does it by various things like blurring it and so on.
Okay.
Noise reduction by taking multiple exposures. You're trying to identify the random bits and getting rid of the random bits. So it's similar to, I'll tell you what, it's similar to object moving. If you're in another exotic place on your holidays, and somebody keeps walking in front of the monument that you're trying to photograph. You see that bugger going across the screen.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing here is pretty much the same thing. Because it appears in a different place in each image, it's sort of like random noise, isn't it? So if we go into File, Scripts, load files into Stack, add open files, well, we can do that. We can tell it to align the object. I mean, you'd probably be on a tripod. I would just have the camera stood on the desk, though. But we'll tell it to align. And it's going to move those files into the layer stack, and then it's going to convert it to a smart object. And now what we've got to do again, go into Layers, Smart Object, Stack Mode. Oops. And again, we can choose median. And it does exactly the same thing. Because, it's random, it only appears in those pictures and not in all the other pictures. Photoshop knows it shouldn't be there, and you end up with it eradicating the person, or in this case a battery, same way as it's doing the noise. It's a lot harder job with the noise, obviously, and it can't possibly get rid of everything, but I think you saw it does quite a good job.
That's impressive.
It's just comparing each different file and looking for the random elements of it, which, I mean, you would normally use that for, I couldn't go out to photograph somebody walking past and I didn't have one available, so I just did it with a mug and a battery, but it's the same thing. I mean, it's quite useful because it's like in these tourist places, there's always tons of people, isn't there?
So Peter,
yes.
when you're getting those original images,
yes,
how are you taking them? What are you doing? I mean, you're just taking one picture and then another, without changing anything?
yes.
Right. So if you're doing depth of field, what's the point of that then?
We're not on depth of field at the moment, are we?
No, I know, but if you were doing the depth of field one, then you'd have to do several images, but obviously focusing on different areas in the picture, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, do you want to do that one?
Yeah, if you've got one there, please, yeah.
I need more at the moment.
Oh, okay.
Let's open what I did with this, because obviously, I mean, the obvious one when you're talking about focus stacking, I mean, yes, you can do it in landscape photography, but the obvious one is macro, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what I did was remember I showed a picture of the kitchen swab.
With a what? Oh, yeah.
Now, obviously, with macro work, you're looking at taking a lot more images. I mean, this stack, just looking at, there's 62 in this stack.
Yeah.
So we'll just wait for it to. And these are full-size files as well. I suppose I could have made the file smaller. I didn't realise we'd take this long over it,
But if it was a landscape shot, you'd only need, I don't know.
half a dozen or so.
Yeah, 4 or 5, I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you know why you would? Do you know why you would do it with a landscape one, Keith?
Well, just for the sharpness throughout.
Give detail in the shadow and cut out the highlights, surely.
Okay,
Pardon?
well, let's go to, just load this up. We'll go to scripts, load files into stack, add open files, and then this time we're just going to click create smart object, I think. Yes. No, we've got to do both. Got to do both. So click on that. When we're doing a landscape, I mean, obviously, most of people would, okay, they're stood in front of a landscape and they want a picture that's sharp front to back. So they bung up or bung down the aperture and they shut it right down to very small. And that introduces diffraction. And some people are saying, well, it doesn't really matter. And if you've got an old camera lens combination, probably the lens isn't that good anyway, so you can't tell what's diffraction and what isn't, what's aberration and so on. But if you these days, I mean, with high resolution cameras and with companies producing higher resolution lenses, I mean, previous to, I don't know, a couple of years ago, people were designing for 30 line pairs per millimeter as being, the maximum resolution needed. Now Sony with its GM lenses, and I expect Canon with whatever it's doing, are designing for 50 line pairs per millimeter, which means they reckon that it's good for 100 megapixel sensors. So with those lenses, you're going to see diffraction a lot sooner. If you had a perfect lens, there's no such animal, but if it was, you would see diffraction right from wide open. As you step down, you would see diffraction straight away, because every lens, diffraction is just a function of the light hitting and bending around the aperture. So if you're in the field now with a good lens like a GM, you can definitely see diffraction early on, and the sweet spot of the lens is, I mean, they're very good wide open at 2.8, but you can see diffraction by f4 or f5.6. But if you choose that as your aperture in landscape, your depth of field is going to be very restricted. So that's when you're going to start to focus stack. I mean, obviously you need an image from the foreground, the midground, and the background as a minimum. But you probably want a couple more in between. So I would have thought, probably 5
Yeah.
5 images to stack. And you've also got to think about your exposure as well, how that's going to work. But that's why, basically, why you're doing it in landscape photography.
Yeah, yeah.
It's to overcome diffraction. So this one's still going, but that's what you need. And this is a fast computer. I don't know whether. Remember, I said Adobe only uses. Well, it is using. In this case, you can see it's using all the 12 cores of the processor to do it. So, but it's doing a lot of work trying to align all those 62 images, and they're large images. I should have probably made them smaller for this. See, each image is 247 megabytes in size, so it's doing quite a job of it.
So the difference in all these 62 images that you took here is different focal points, is that?
Different focal points, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
What could you get away with then?
it entirely depends on what you're taking, Keith.
Well, in this one, say you've done 64 on this, but
62.
or 62.
I wouldn't like to have done any less on this one.
Wouldn't you?
No.
All right.
Well,
I
if
mean,
you look, Keith, it's how much is in depth of field in that part, that image that's there now.
Yeah.
Then you've got to work back through the image and have multiples of that depth of field, haven't you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. But I just thought 64 seemed a bit extreme, that was all. Well, obviously not.
Well, no, I mean, you're just not going to get, with a macro shot, you just don't get that much in focus. You see how things are coming into focus. But if you didn't have a lot of...
Yeah.
So would these have been on a rail then, Peter, and you sort of move it a millimetre at a time or something?
That's it.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be that, yeah.
So then it's produced this one, Untitled 1. And just as a matter of interest, if we look down here, can you see that?
Yeah, 70.
So the scratch disk is now 70.8, and the file size is 52 gig.
Cool.
You do need something pretty meaty to process something like that. So, I mean, if you haven't got a fast computer, you'd probably get away. You'd take fewer photographs and see what you got to, wouldn't you?
So what's that showing us then, Peter? That's aligned all the images together, has it?
It's aligned all the images.
So they're all overlaying on each other. Yeah.
Right. I was just going through and deleting the TIFFs that we're not using now, so that we're not getting confused. Let's not delete that one. Yeah, so that's, you can see here that it's converted the stack into a smart object. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
See that? I mean, you can't see it, but that little tiny thing in the corner means it's now a smart object. So now what we've got to do is go up into edit. Oh no, sorry. Smart object. I buggered this up, haven't I? No, I shouldn't have done that. To a smart object, and that's all right. Okay. What we need to do, rather than use it as a smart object, what we have to do is go into edit and auto blend layers. What happened then?
Well, let you do it. It's grey instead of dark, isn't it?
Oh, I know, idiot. Not you, me. I forgot to select all the layers. I don't normally do this in Photoshop. I do it with something like Helicon, or what's the other one, Martin?
I'm not sure. It's Helicon I tried a couple of months ago just as a trial.
Well, Helicon does it a lot better, but if you remember to select all the layers and go into Auto Blend, and then what you've got to do is choose Stack Images and click OK. Don't have contact will fill check, just Stack Images, and then it'll do the same thing that Helicon Focus does. I find Helicon Focus easier to use and it does a better job.
Yeah, you can get a sort of free trial for 30 days with it and just play around with it and use it. But
Yeah, well,
it seemed to be less like user interaction than you're having to do here. You just
that's right. You
put
just
the images in, hit the button, and it goes and works it all out for you.
That's right. I mean, there's just a lot more steps here, and if you forget it because you're not used to it, you look like an idiot. But there you go. Xyrene Stacker, that's the other one, Martin. I mean, I cheat a bit. What I do is I download a test of the program. I have RX Restore running on the computer. Install Helicon Focus, use it to do what I want. Reboot the computer and it deletes everything and goes back to where it was before you loaded the trial program, so you can do it again.
So you just keep using the trial programs whenever you fancy.
Yeah, because I don't do macro that often, so I don't mind that I have to reinstall it if I want to do some macro work.
Can't remember how much Helicon was. It was a reasonable amount of money.
Yeah, I can't offhand.
I can't remember offhand.
No. Well,
Keith, is this giving you what you want? Because I'm conscious that you've asked for stacking demo for several years now, and we've never quite got round to doing it for you.
Yeah.
Well, there it's done it, Keith.
Yes, that's excellent.
I did load. I mean, obviously, there's issues. You always get issues. I mean, there's some noise around here that needs dealing with, and you've got an area here that needs some cloning, and an area here that needs cloning. So we won't do that now. But I did. Let me just have a look.
So it's actually giving you an image that's physically impossible to get in any other way, isn't it? Unless you.
Oh yeah. There's no other way you can.
Yeah, no other way you would get that depth.
No, you just can't. No, not at macro. Well, at macro sizes you can't. Well, anything really. I mean, it's the way it is, isn't it? But you can see it's a fairly lengthy process. I slipped up there. I should have downsized those images before I started, and then it would have been a bit easier. Would have just had a lower resolution file because we're quite big now on the. Where are we now on the Scratch 98 and 52 gigabytes? So it uses. I mean, you use up a lot of resources if you're doing stuff like this. And you need a fast machine. What you can do as well is if you click efficiency, that tells you how well you're doing in Photoshop with regard to efficiency of Photoshop and the scratch disk. And it tells me we're down to 91%. If you get down to 80–85%, you really do need to get some more RAM because your machine's going to really struggle if it gets down to that level.
Okay.
So there you go.
Yeah, thank you, Peter.
Yeah, well, hopefully we've covered one or two of the points. As Martin says, I do tend to go on a bit, I know.
No, that's fine. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm glad we've done the macro, this stacking bit tacked on the end because it gives something for everyone then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's but no, all through this evening, Peter, 90% of what you've shown me tonight is new to me. and I've been using Photoshop for a little while, and it just shows that I expect I'm not alone in that we just pick up these softwares, use the defaults, and I think, as Keith said in the break, we're almost afraid to tweak it because we're not sure what we're unraveling or undoing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Certainly with your depth of knowledge, you know, okay, get rid of that border bit. It has no impact on anything meaningful, and it's just a nicety. So just get rid of it. You know.
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
So thank you for what you've done, Peter.
Okay.
Cheers, Peter.
Cheers, Keith.
Thank you, Peter.
Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome, my friend.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter.
I'll be rushing away doing macro stacks now.
So what do we feel about? I actually find doing this, being able to look close up at a screen. We've recorded it, so hopefully we'll be able to look at it again. I think it's an ideal thing to do while we're doing these Zoom meetings. I think
it works well.
you pick up more than you do looking at a distance at a screen where you can't make out hide nor hair what is actually being done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've got the interaction the way we can say, oh, just go over that again, or which action was that, Peter? And it's ideal. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank
Good.
you, Peter. Excellent.
As long as you got something out of it, I'm happy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've got my actual computer on here, and I had Photoshop up, and the things you were showing, because I'm looking at this on my iPad, so the things you were showing me, I was quickly going up on the Photoshop and having a look and having a go while you were talking about it. Yeah. So that helped.
Well, if there's something you didn't get, you can always contact me, and I'll try and
well,
help out.
If Martin's recorded it as well, so
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop the recording now then. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Lovely.
Oops. What